Hey everyone, welcome back. Things have been kind of rough lately, so I thought we'd dive into something you guys might be ready for. That's resilience and how we can all bounce back, even better than before.
I love that idea, especially right now. We can actually move past just coping and actually thrive after going through some tough times.
It's pretty amazing stuff, right? I've been digging into some research on this, and I found some really interesting stuff on resilience training.
Yeah, no, I was looking at that too. Did you see that stuff about how the brain handles all that stress?
Oh, yeah. And there were even some things about how, coping with stress is different from preventing it in the first place.
And there are so many different ways to think about resilience, but what makes someone truly resilient? How do we define that?
That's a great question. And to be honest, that's one of the things that really surprised me in the research.
So tell me, what did you find?
Well, for one thing, there's this whole model called tutors of resilience. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating. It's all about how we can shift our mindset. Instead of just dealing with stuff, we can actually build strength.
Exactly. It's not just about getting by. It's about building ourselves up so we can actually handle whatever comes our way.
What I find really interesting is that it's not just some vague self-help stuff. The Tutors of Resilience model is actually based on some pretty solid research.
And they don't just tell you to think positive or whatever. They actually give you tools and strategies to make actual change happen.
Exactly. It's about giving people the skills to face challenges and actually thrive. And, they've used this model all over the world to help people with all sorts of challenges.
That's amazing. Speaking of research, I saw something about the amygdala and how it's like our brain's alarm system. But honestly, I don't really get how that connects to resilience.
Oh, that's a great point. I think it's super important to understand what happens in our brains when we're stressed,
Yeah.
How does the amygdala play into all of this?
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Okay, so imagine your amygdala. It's like this little guard dog in your brain. And whenever it senses danger, whether it's real or just something you're imagining, that little guard dog goes crazy.
So it's like setting off an alarm.
Yeah. And that's when you get that fight or flight response. Your heart starts racing, your breathing gets all fast, and suddenly it's hard to think straight.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling all too well. It's like your brain just goes into survival mode.
Exactly. And in those moments, the rational part of your brain kind of takes a back seat.
Okay. So stress basically hijacks our brains.
Yeah.
But if that's how we're wired, how can we actually build resilience?
Well, the good news is we have this other part of our brain called the cortex, and that's where the thinking and planning happens, It's the part that helps us stay calm and make good decisions.
So it's like the voice of reason.
Exactly. And resilience is about strengthening that voice of reason so it can take control even when that amygdala alarm is blaring.
So it's not about getting rid of stress altogether.
Right.
It's more about learning how to manage it so we can still function.
Exactly. It's about being able to recognize what's happening in your brain and body when stress hits, and then having some strategies to calm that inner guard dog down.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So are you saying we can actually train our brains to be more resilient?
You absolutely can. It's like working out a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So tell me, how do we work out this resilience muscle? What are some of those strategies?
Well, that's where this Tutors of Resilience model comes in. It's all about moving from a just cope mindset to a let's build strength approach.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this model. How does it actually work? What makes it different?
So the Tutors of Resilience model has this really cool framework. They call it the PEARLS principles. It's 6 key areas that have been shown to really boost resilience, and they're all based on some solid research.
Okay, so PEARLS principles. That sounds kind of catchy, but tell me more. What exactly are these PEARLS?
Well, P stands for positive reframing. And it's all about shifting your perspective. Instead of focusing on all the negative stuff, it's about trying to see the opportunity in those challenging situations.
Okay, so it's kind of like looking for that silver lining. But honestly, sometimes that feels impossible. Like when you're right in the middle of something tough, how can you possibly find anything positive?
You're right. It's not about pretending that everything's perfect. It's more about acknowledging how difficult things are and then asking yourself, okay, what can I actually learn from this? Or how can I use this experience to grow from it?
So it's not about denying the reality. It's about choosing to see it in a different light.
Exactly. Even a small shift in your perspective can make a big difference. Like instead of saying, I can't believe this is happening, try asking yourself, okay, this is tough, but what's one good thing I can take away from it?
That's a really good point. I can see how that could be helpful. So positive reframing is about shifting our perspective. What's the E stand for in PEARLS?
E is for empowerment. And that's all about recognizing your own strengths and resources, even when things are really tough. Think about it. You've already made it through some tough times, which means you have this inner strength you might not even realize.
I like that idea. But sometimes when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's hard to remember what you're even good at, let alone feel empowered.
That's where self-compassion comes in. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a friend. We're often our own worst critics, but beating yourself up doesn't help anyone. Empowerment is about recognizing your own worth even when you're struggling.
Okay, that makes sense. So positive reframing helps us see things differently, and empowerment reminds us of our own inner strength. What's next on our little resilience journey?
The A is for agency and activation. And this is all about moving from feeling stuck to taking action. It's about realizing that even in tough situations, we still have choices, and we can make decisions that actually shape our experience.
So it's about taking back some control, even if it's just in small ways. That really resonates with me because during that really stressful time I was going through, I just felt so powerless. Like things were just happening to me, and I had no say in it.
That's exactly it. Agency is about reminding yourself that you actually have the power to influence your situation, even if it's just in small ways. Think about it this way. What's one small step you could have taken back then that might have helped you feel a little more in control?
Even just reaching out to a friend for support would have made a huge difference. I just isolated myself thinking I had to deal with everything on my own.
And that brings us to R, which stands for recovery. Because resilience isn't about just pushing through without taking any breaks. It's about understanding how important rest and rejuvenation are.
So self-care is actually part of building resilience. It's not just something we do if we have extra time. Wow, I'll admit I'm terrible at prioritizing self-care, but I'm starting to see how important it really is.
It's essential. Think of it like this. You can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care isn't selfish. It's actually essential for filling back up your energy so you can keep going.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so we've got positive reframing, empowerment, agency, and activation and recovery. What's next on our PEARLS list?
L is for listening and communicating actively. This is about being present, both for yourself and for others. It's about really tuning in to what's going on both inside and outside of yourself.
Active listening. So it's more than just hearing the words. But how does that connect to resilience?
Think of it like this. By really listening to yourself, you become more aware of your own stress triggers and how you react to them. And you start to see what coping mechanisms actually work for you. That self-awareness helps you make better choices about how you respond to challenges.
Okay, so it's about understanding yourself better so you can take better care of yourself. And what about communicating actively? How does that fit in?
Communicating actively means expressing yourself in a clear and honest way, but also respecting the other person's perspective. It's about creating a safe space for real dialogue. And when you feel heard and understood, it can really reduce stress and it strengthens your connections, which are super important for resilience.
Right, because feeling connected and supported makes a huge difference, especially when you're going through tough times. So active listening helps us understand ourselves and others better, which then makes us feel more connected and supported. It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. And that leads us to our last PEARLS principle, supporting relationships.
The power of connection. Tell me more about that.
Humans are social creatures. We thrive on connection. Supporting relationships is all about nurturing those healthy relationships and building a strong social support network. This could be family, friends, colleagues, or even online communities.
So it's about knowing you're not alone in all of this.
Exactly. We're wired for connection, and during times of stress, those connections become even more important. They provide a buffer against stress and a foundation for resilience. Think about the people who supported you through those tough times. How did their presence make a difference?
Just knowing I had people to talk to vent, to laugh with it, made a world of difference.
And that's the power of those supporting relationships. They're like a buffer against stress and a foundation for resilience.
This is amazing stuff. So these PEARLS principles are like tools we can use to actually strengthen our resilience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the best part is that resilience is a skill. It's something we can learn and develop over time, just like anything else.
Wait, so you're telling me I can actually train my brain to be more resilient?
You absolutely can. And the more you practice these principles, the stronger that resilience muscle becomes.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. But hold on, before we get too carried away with all this positive reframing and empowerment, I have a confession.
Yeah.
Sometimes self-care feels impossible. Like when you're in the thick of it, just getting through the day feels like a victory. How can you even think about building resilience when you're running on fumes?
You've hit on a really important point, and the research actually backs this up. Even something as simple as not getting enough sleep can have a noticeable impact on how our brains work.
Seriously, just one night of bad sleep.
Yep, studies show that even mild sleep deprivation can affect our creative thinking, make it harder to control our impulses, and even interfere with those higher order thinking skills we were talking about earlier.
Wow. So being tired literally makes it harder to think clearly and make good decisions. No wonder I felt so overwhelmed during that stressful period I was barely sleeping.
Sleep is crucial for both physical and mental recovery. It's when our brains process emotions, consolidate memories, and recharge for the next day.
So self-care isn't just a luxury. It's a necessity for building resilience.
Absolutely. It's like trying to run a marathon without ever stopping to rest or refuel. Eventually, you're going to hit a wall.
Okay, that makes total sense. But what if you're struggling with more than just sleep? What if it's anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges?
That's where professional help can be invaluable. Therapists, counselors, and other mental health professionals can provide guidance, support, and evidence-based strategies for managing those challenges and building resilience. Remember, seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
That's such an important reminder. It's okay to ask for help.
Exactly. And remember, resilience is a journey, not a destination. It's about progress, not perfection.
I love that. So if we're thinking about resilience as a journey, what's the next step?
Let's dive into some practical ways to actually apply these PEARS principles in everyday life.
Okay, listeners, get ready for some actionable advice.
First up, let's talk about P-positive reframing.
Okay, I'm ready to reframe my way to resilience. Let's do this.
Remember that example we talked about earlier about shifting your perspective? Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, try to focus on what you can learn from that challenging situation.
Right, what can I learn from this experience? I like that. It feels more empowering.
Exactly. It's about finding that opportunity for growth, even in the midst of difficulty. Think of it as turning lemons into lemonade, but for your brain.
Brain lemonade. I'm into it. Yeah. But what if the lemon feels really, really big? Like, what if it's something major, like losing your job or a serious health issue?
That's when it can be helpful to break things down into smaller steps. Instead of trying to reframe the whole situation at once, just focus on finding one small positive aspect or lesson within that experience. For example, if you've lost your job, maybe this is an opportunity to finally pursue that passion project you've been putting off.
Ooh, I like that. It's about finding that silver lining even in the toughest of times.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to acknowledge those negative emotions too. It's not about denying the pain or hardship. It's about finding a way to move forward with a more positive and hopeful outlook.
Okay, that makes sense. So step one, positive reframing check. What's next on our resilience toolkit?
Let's move on to E for empowerment.
Empowerment. Okay, I'm feeling ready to tap into my inner strength. What's the key here?
It's about recognizing your strengths, your resources, your capabilities.
Even when you feel like you have none.
Especially when you feel like you have none. This is where self-compassion comes in. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend. We tend to be our own harshest critics.
Oh, tell me about it. My inner critic could win an Olympic medal in negativity.
But here's the thing, that inner critic isn't helpful. It's like a bully in your own mind. And you wouldn't let a bully dictate your life, would you?
Absolutely not. Time to stand up to that inner critic. But how do I actually do that? It feels so ingrained.
It takes practice, but you can start by just noticing that negative self-talk and challenging those thoughts. Ask yourself, is this thought really true? Is it helpful? What would I say to a friend who is feeling this way?
Okay, that's a really good point. I would never say to a friend the things I sometimes say to myself.
Exactly. So start by being kinder to yourself. Acknowledge your strengths, even the small ones. Celebrate your accomplishments no matter how insignificant they might seem. And remember, you are capable of more than you think.
I love that. Okay, so positive reframing is about finding the opportunity for growth, and empowerment is about recognizing our inner strength. What's next?
A stands for agency and activation.
Bring on the action. I'm ready to take charge.
Remember, agency is about recognizing that you have the power to influence your situation, even if it's in small ways. And activation is about taking those concrete steps to actually make those changes happen.
So it's about moving from feeling stuck to feeling empowered to make a difference.
Exactly. Think about one area of your life where you'd like to feel more resilient. What's one small, actionable step you can take this week to move toward that goal?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's about managing my stress better. I tend to get overwhelmed easily, and that can spiral into anxiety. So maybe my action step could be to try a new relaxation technique like meditation or deep breathing exercises.
That's a great idea. And remember, even small actions can have a ripple effect. Just taking that first step can create momentum and inspire you to keep going.
Okay, I'm feeling motivated. So we've got positive reframing, empowerment, and agency and activation. What's next on our resilience journey?
R stands for recovery. Remember, resilience isn't about pushing yourself to the limit without taking breaks. It's about recognizing the importance of rest, relaxation, and rejuvenation.
Yes, self-care is not selfish. It's essential. But sometimes it feels like there's just not enough time in the day. How do you make time for self-care when you're already feeling overwhelmed?
It's about prioritizing and making conscious choices. Think about it this way. If you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of anything else effectively. It's like trying to run a car without ever stopping to refuel. Eventually, you're going to break down.
Okay, that's a really good analogy. So how do we actually refuel ourselves? What are some practical self-care strategies?
It depends on what works best for you, but some common strategies include getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, exercising regularly, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, and engaging in activities that bring you joy.
Okay, that's a great list. I think for me, getting back into nature would be a really good starting point. I used to love hiking, but I haven't done it in ages.
That sounds like a wonderful plan. And remember, self-care doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. Even just taking 5 minutes to sit quietly and focus on your breath can make a difference.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered positive reframing, empowerment agency, and activation and recovery. We're getting close to the end of our PEIRLS journey. What's next?
L stands for listening and communicating actively. Remember, it's about being present both for yourself and for others.
So it's about tuning in both internally and externally.
Exactly. Active listening involves paying attention to both verbal and nonverbal cues, asking clarifying questions, and seeking to understand the other person's perspective. It's also about being mindful of your own thoughts, feelings, and needs.
Okay, so it's a two-way street. But how does active listening actually help build resilience?
By listening attentively to yourself, you become more aware of your own stress, triggers your emotional patterns, and your coping mechanisms. This self-awareness allows you to make more conscious choices about how you respond to challenges.
That makes sense. So it's about knowing yourself better so you can take better care of yourself.
Precisely. And by listening actively to others, you build stronger relationships, foster empathy, and create a sense of connection and support. This sense of belonging is crucial for resilience, as it reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles.
I love that. So active listening is about deepening our understanding of ourselves and others, which in turn helps us feel more connected and supported.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for open and honest communication, both internally and externally.
Okay, I'm ready to start listening more actively.
Left.
What's the final pearl on our list?
S stands for supporting relationships. Remember, we are social creatures who thrive in connection. Supporting relationships is about nurturing healthy relationships and building a strong social support network.
So it's about knowing that we're not alone in this.
Exactly. Humans are wired for connection, and during times of stress, those connections become even more important. They provide a buffer against stress, a source of emotional support, and a reminder that we are loved and valued.
Okay, so how do we actually build and nurture these supporting relationships? I'm thinking about that saying, it takes a village.
It does. And it's not just about having lots of friends or acquaintances. It's about having a few deep, meaningful connections with people who you can truly rely on. This could be family members, close friends, mentors, colleagues, or even members of a support group. The key is to find people who you feel safe and comfortable being yourself around, people who will listen without judgment and offer support without trying to fix you.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's about quality over quantity when it comes to supportive relationships. But what if you're feeling isolated or lonely? How do you even start building those connections?
That's a valid concern. Sometimes reaching out can feel daunting, especially if you've been feeling withdrawn or isolated. But remember, there are people who care about you and want to connect. It might take some effort, but it's worth it. Think about your interests or hobbies. Are there any groups or activities you could join where you might meet like-minded people? Or maybe there are online communities or forums where you can connect with others who share your interests or experiences.
Those are great suggestions. I think sometimes we forget how many opportunities there are to connect with others, both online and offline.
Exactly. And remember, building relationships takes time. It's about being patient, being yourself, and being open to connecting with others.
I love that. So we've covered all 6 PEARLS principles: positive reframing, empowerment, agency, and activation recovery, listening and communicating actively, and supporting relationships. That's a lot to take in.
It is. But remember, these principles are like tools in your resilience toolkit. You don't have to use them all at once. Start with one or two that resonate with you and see how they make a difference in your life.
That's great advice. So we've talked about what resilience is, how our brains react to stress, and we've even explored some practical ways to build resilience using the PEARLS principles. But I'm curious, is there anything else we should know about resilience? Any other insights from the research?
There is one more fascinating finding I'd like to share. The research suggests that there might be a link between metaphor comprehension and resilience, particularly when it comes to managing impulsivity and aggression.
Wait, what? Metaphor comprehension, like understanding figurative language. How does that relate to resilience?
It seems counterintuitive, but studies have shown that adolescents with higher levels of conventional metaphor comprehension tend to exhibit lower levels of impulsivity, which in turn can lead to reduced aggression.
That's so interesting. So being able to understand metaphors might actually help us regulate our emotions and behaviors better.
That's what the research suggests. It seems that understanding metaphorical language requires higher-order thinking skills like cognitive flexibility and abstract reasoning. And these same skills are also essential for emotional regulation and resilience.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. I never would have guessed that there could be a connection between metaphor comprehension and resilience.
It just goes to show that the human brain is incredibly complex and interconnected, and there's still so much we're learning about how our brains work and how we can optimize our cognitive and emotional functioning.
This has been an amazing deep dive into resilience. We've covered so much ground, from brain science to practical strategies to surprising insights about metaphor comprehension.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you and our listeners. Remember, resilience is a journey, not a destination. It's about progress, not perfection. And it's a skill that we can all develop and strengthen over time.
Absolutely. So, dear listeners, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. If resilience is about more than just coping, what is one area of your life where you want to focus on building long-term strength? And what's one small step you can take towards that goal this week? Take some time to reflect on that, and remember, you have the power within you to create positive change. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep building your resilience.
You know, it really is amazing how these little things can have such a big impact on our resilience, like getting enough sleep or even understanding metaphor.
I know, right? It's like our brains are full of these hidden connections, and the more we learn about them, the better we can understand ourselves.
Exactly. Speaking of which, you mentioned something earlier about sleep and resilience that really piqued my interest. Can you tell me more about that research you were talking about?
Oh, yeah, that was a fascinating one. Apparently, even just one night of not getting enough sleep can really mess with our creative thinking and make it harder to control our impulses.
That's right. The study found that even mild sleep deprivation can cause us to rely more on those old habits and thought patterns, making it harder to come up with new ideas or see things from a fresh perspective.
So basically, when we're tired, our brains get stuck in a rut. No wonder I felt so uninspired and irritable during that stressful time. I was practically running on fumes.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. Sleep is when our brains process emotions, consolidate memories, and recharge for the day ahead. If we're not getting enough sleep, we're essentially running on an empty tank.
Okay, that's a pretty powerful metaphor. So
Yeah.
if we're really serious about building resilience, getting enough sleep has to be a top priority.
Absolutely. It's not just about feeling rested, it's about giving our brains the downtime they need to function at their best.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It feels like we've uncovered a whole new way of thinking about resilience. It's not just about toughing it out. It's about understanding ourselves, taking care of ourselves, and building a support system that helps us thrive.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Resilience is a journey, and it's one we don't have to take alone.
So true. Well, dear listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and tools to start building your own resilience. Remember, it's a process, not a destination. Be kind to yourself, celebrate your strengths, and keep moving forward one step at a time. We'll see you next time.